Hello, and welcome to Women in Business, where we interview entrepreneurs and senior managers and show you the strengths, successes, obstacles, and roadblocks women experience in business. Since I believe every person in business needs to be visible, I'd like to invite you to watch www.sob6, that's the number 6, tips.com, which will give you some valuable information should you get the call to be on radio or TV, which I think is extremely important. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at Gayle Carson, that's Gayle, Gayle Carson 13 at gmail.com, or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Gayle Carson with Women in Business, and we have a wonderful show for you today. And I want to remind you that if any of you are looking to have a little conversation with me about anything in the world that you want to talk about, or maybe even, maybe some of the guests you'd like to hear on the show, I'd love to do that. So if you go to my website, spunkyoldbroad.com, and go to the contact page, you can leave me a message and all your information there, and I will get back to you and we'll have a conversation. But in the meantime, I have a wonderful guest, Vicky Oliver. She is a leading career development expert and the multi-best-selling author of 5 books, including, now get set for this, Bad Bosses, Crazy Coworkers, and Other Office Idiots, 301 Smart Answers to Tough Interview Questions, which was named in the top 10 list of the best books for HR interview prep, and 301 Smart Answers to Tough Business Etiquette Questions. She's a sought-after speaker and seminar presenter and a popular media source, having made over 901, remember it's 901 appearances in broadcast, print, and online outlets. Welcome to our show, Vicky.
Thank you so much for having me.
You talk about the things that are important for people who are trying to be successful in business. You're trying to alert them to the fact of things they need to look out for and be aware of. So what are the keys for how companies should better engage workers in the big picture of each task or project that they do?
Right. It's a fantastic question. First of all, today, really, we're almost at 100% employment rate, and a lot of times people come on and they really aren't trained. They may have been hired quickly, because there's a lot of demand for workers now, and bosses really have an obligation to explain, to share their vision with their employees. I would say that would be the number one thing, that don't expect, if you are a boss, don't expect that the people working for you necessarily embrace your vision yet. It's up to you. Leadership is a privilege, and it's up to you to explain what it is that you want from them.
Well, that's nice if everybody would do it, correct? But we have to get bosses that are really doing that. And I'm going to ask you a question now with a word you don't hear very often. What are some principles of common business decorum that most apply to people in leadership roles? Because probably, I don't know how many of them really have it.
Exactly. There are different leadership styles, right? And one leadership style is to be sort of a lone wolf, and you are there and you feel more comfortable maybe closing your door and getting your work done, getting your tasks done. That's one type of boss. And often that ability to get the work off your desk will get you promoted into a management position. That you're talented at the task. However, once you are there, it's really important not to close your door, not to identify as a lone wolf anymore. Now you have to be more extroverted. You have to keep your door open and be open and available for feedback. It's no longer the case that people on the top are just dishing out orders. There has to be buy-in from the people who work for them. So part of that is sharing their vision, which we've talked about, and part of it is just also just being open to feedback and realizing great ideas can come from anywhere. It's not necessarily the top managers who are going to have the best ideas. So if you are a boss, you want to keep your door open so that the ideas are flowing, that people feel that they can come to you.
Well, certainly I would think that the people on the ground floor are the people who have the best ideas because they're dealing with their stuff every single day. So they know what procedures work the best, what customers want more of, et cetera, et cetera. But, when I taught a lot of leadership workshops and classes, one of the things that I suggested was, yeah, you need to have an open door, but you can also have a time that people can get with you. In other words, if you're there from 9 to 5, which is usually not the case, you're usually there longer than that, but using 9 to 5, you could come in and from 9 to 10, people can come in and dump all their stuff on you and ask the questions that they have from the day before. And then you can kind of say, well, I'm going into hibernation from 10 to 11 or 11:30 and then whatever for lunch. And then, you can also have open door policy during the afternoon, but say, from X to X, I've got to get certain things done. And so unless it's a dire emergency, that's my time to get my stuff done. And as long as people
love that
know,
idea.
yeah,
I love that idea.
If people know that you're there for them, but you got to get your own stuff done, they're pretty agreeable to that. And one of the things that I found out also as a leader, because I've always had my own companies, is that if I said, something, I really want to talk to you about this, but I can't do it until whatever time, because I was, mine was kind of a 24-hour schedule. But let's just say, come back around 5 minutes of 5 and we'll talk about it then. Everybody solved the problem because nobody wanted to come back at 5 o'clock and stay late, So there are ways to get this stuff done, So,
absolutely. I love that. I love compartmentalizing it into the last 5 minutes of the day so that people just really have, they also have to quickly condense it too,
That's true. That's true.
Right. But back to what you were saying about, it's not always the top people who really have the best ideas, because sometimes it's the people in the middle or even the people at the bottom who are hearing customer complaints, for example, and they might have important feedback to share.
No question at all. But you say that there's a topic that makes most people cringe, and that's micromanaging. And but there are some people, that's what they do. I mean, they're very detail oriented and it has to go a certain way. So tell us how micromanaging leads to costly, employee disengagement.
Right. So a lot of times, like in my book, Bad Bosses, Crazy Coworkers, and Other Office Idiots, I describe different types of bosses. And one of them is the, constant micromanager, the person that's leaning over your shoulder to watch what you are typing on your computer as you do it. That type of person, the person who needs to know your daily to-do list along with their own daily to-do list. And the problem with that is it really squelches innovation. It just squelches the employee's desire to stretch because they feel like there's a mother figure or a father figure, looking over them, telling them every single minute what they have to do. And a lot of people really just despise working for that type of an individual, And it's just so much better to back off, try to give yourself and your employees enough rope to hang themselves. Just let them do their tasks. Don't keep walking in and asking them what they're doing. Set up a time, as you said, to check in with them where they know that they're going to report to you at that time, but don't keep constantly dropping by and asking them what they're doing. It's going to create an atmosphere of distrust where they're going to try to just sort of get out from underneath you. You are being too heavy-handed as a manager.
That's so true. And, it's so funny because you get one to the other. You either get the one that abdicates the responsibility, or not a responsibility, let's just say accountability, because as a boss, you are accountable no matter what. So there is the one that totally abdicates that, and then there's the other one we just talked about, who is looking over your shoulder all the time. So
Right.
you also say that there are short-term and long-term benefits to letting people fail. And I think that's true. I mean, nobody intentionally wants to fail. I don't think anybody gets up in the morning and says, I'm going to go to work today and fail as much as I can. I mean, they're not going to do that. But what are some of the benefits that you've seen in letting people fail?
Well, you want your employees to take risks on behalf of your company, to take calculated, smart risks on behalf of your company, to go after that pie-in-the-sky client, because sometimes that person will rope them in, to have the crazy idea, because sometimes that's the idea that wins. And in order to encourage that in your people who work for you, occasionally they're going to fail, because not all ideas are great, not all ideas will work, and also there's the matter of timing too. Like a great idea that might have worked last year, maybe this year in this environment, it's not going to work anymore, And in order to allow them to stretch enough to perform their best, you also have to be willing to say occasionally, it's okay to fail if you really tried. And you just don't have that if you cut them off at the knees each time they fail, they're not going to stretch for you.
And not only that, most inventions and most new methodologies have come from people failing. I mean, they've had to try it 20, 50, 100 times before it works. So people should be aware of it. But, I guess the difference is, Vicky, if they get penalized for it. If they get penalized for failing, if they've tried their best and something doesn't work and they're called to task for that, that's where it really is a problem. So
it is a problem. And even with giving people the freedom to fail, you don't want somebody to keep failing and failing and failing. That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking about having an atmosphere that encourages risk-taking on behalf of the company, and sometimes those risks are going to fall flat. It's just not going to work. And, you have to be able to sort of say, okay, here's a time, I mean, this is where you can be an inspirational leader. You can say, here's a time when I failed early in my career, and talk to them about that, to pick up the employee morale.
Well, it's true. I mean, we just need to have that real open, warm, friendly, welcoming atmosphere. So what are some of the things that you found that will keep employees interested and concerned in their jobs?
So first off, I feel, that the boss should share the mission, whatever the mission is, what he or she feels the mission is, and to reinforce it too. It's not just one meeting. It's reinforcing it. It's talking about how different ideas either, support the mission or don't support the mission. Having kind of a set of strong criteria by which the boss analyzes the ideas and trying to stick to them so that people know what's expected of them so that they can do it. So that would be one thing I would say would be very helpful. Beyond that, I think, we're in an era, even though it's practically full employment, we're in an era where a lot of layers of different companies were cut in the last couple of decades. And I think that everybody, both the workers, the employees and the bosses, are all wearing a lot of different hats. And to be able to be flexible and to move like that, to be flexible and move swiftly too, I think is important.
So do you think that these things are commonplace in today's work world, or are they coveted by only a few?
I think in certain companies they are commonplace because that is what the companies are looking for when they hire people. They're looking for that agility, the swiftness to move, and if you're a boss, they're looking for your ability to share your vision. So if you look at some of the companies that are performing fantastically, I think you can say, yes, many of the people in those organizations have those skills. But, some of these skills are things I think that boomers have to learn better, And some of the skills are might be things that millennials have to learn better too, But I'm just trying to say in broad strokes, this is what I think constitutes being a great leader, and saying that leadership is something that the people under you have to buy into, you being the leader. It's not necessarily a given just because you have the salary level that people are going to follow what you say.
Well, that's true. I agree. Unless they're scared to death of you. So
Right.
I don't know.
Which hopefully they're not. Hopefully they're not.
So I know
because,
this is, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Because I was going to say, one of the things that makes, I think, also a good leader is the ability to have empathy and to listen to other people. And I think, that's sort of one of those soft skills that sometimes is hard to develop. But, half of it, I think, is just knowing where your strengths and your own weaknesses lie and working on yourself, too.
Well, that's true as well. But I know there's something that you said you personally can't stand, and that's if people tell you that they're going to do something and they don't follow through. So I kind of was thinking that this would be more of an employee kind of thing, but you're saying that leaders often flounder on their position and they don't make good on their promises. So it's really a two-edged sword.
Right. I mean, usually in most companies there are a few different levels of leadership, and there's somebody often in the middle to upper management who sometimes can waffle, because they think something going in and then it turns out that isn't working, but there are people under them, who are pursuing that. So a lot of times it comes down to really just great communication skills. If you know what's going on in the company, be transparent, tell the people under you what is happening. This is particularly important if there's any sort of news that's going on, like if there's a merger in the works or something like that. You just have to keep the channels open and be honest about it.
True, very true. And that's why when things happen, they say people are shocked by something, or, they very often you hear about people coming in for the Christmas party and then the next day they're fired,
Right.
There's just so much
really
of this.
Do. And you know why, actually? You know why? Because unfortunately, Christmas, like that holiday, is often the time when people are let go, because it coordinates with the fiscal year of the company, And by the end of the year, that time when people should be celebrating, that's when bosses are cutting their staffs.
Yeah, yeah. And the days of working 30 years for the same company, it doesn't exist anymore, So,
right.
And besides which, companies get bought up and they get merged. And I remember when I was going back, when I got my certified speaking professional, you had to prove that you had spoken for, I think it was 500 different speeches, but for 250 companies, and anyway, at a certain amount of money and so forth. And so I went back a few years later to follow up with these people to see if they wanted to hire me again. And I would tell you 80% of them were not there. They were either merged or bought up or something had happened. So it's such a crazy world out there. But,
I just want to say, it kind of reminds me. So I used to be in the advertising business before I started writing all these books. And I had been hired at this ad agency, a mid-sized ad agency in Manhattan, which is where I live. And I was a writer, and there was this fellow who was one of the art directors there, and I asked him how long he had been at the company, and he said he had been there 7 years, but he had 7 different bosses, so in fact it was 7 different jobs.
Wow. So he wasn't changing, but the bosses kept changing.
Right.
That's interesting. Wow. Well, another thing that you talk about is empathy. Now, I happen to love empathy. I think it's very important that you have empathy for other people. Not necessarily always sympathy, but empathy. You need to understand who they are, where they're coming from, etc. But you say it's a hot topic in workplace culture. So tell us a little bit about that. What do you mean by that?
So empathy used to be considered sort of a feminine skill, kind of a soft skill that maybe more female managers would have than male managers, just loosely, broadly, and therefore kind of, soft. But today, it's being, touted as a real strength to have. It's not just like, oh, hi, how are you? How was your weekend? type of banter. It's really trying to understand the people who work for you. Do they have families? Do they have other obligations that are, mean that they can't work, like on the weekends, something like that. And, to try to figure out what they're doing when they're not at the office so that you can be a better leader for them. So you can understand. So if somebody comes to you and says, oh, I need to take a pregnancy leave, whatever it is, you need to be empathetic so that they love you. The point is, you don't want them to just sort of cower and respect you. You want employees who will really go to bat for you, who will really love you and go all the way for you.
No question about that, because, the interesting thing is, I think there are more families today whose breadwinners are women rather than men. There are certainly more single moms out there than there are single dads, although single dads are coming up in our population. But they do have issues. I mean, they do have doctor's appointments and dentist appointments and, all these activities the kids are in today and all of that. I mean, you can't be a wet mop. People can't walk all over you. But it is important to be able to understand what these people are going through. And they will make a better employee if you are sensitive to their needs. So
right. And
I think
sometimes people can't work, maybe they can't work on premises for you, but if you have the flexibility and you say, you know what, it's fine, work a little bit over the weekend, just slip it in, they may not be able to come into the office as much as some other employees, but if you are empathetic and you understand where they're coming from, you can work with them.
And that goes to your point on reasonableness, how leaders need to really develop a reputation for reasonableness. So what does that mean to be reasonable?
Anybody can stand up and pound the table and storm out of the room. Anyone can do that. It's really letting their temper get the best of them. But fantastic leaders really try to restrain their tempers more often than not. I'm not saying never. I'm saying more often than not. Because people who are reasonable are respected. If you know that your boss is really working hard to find the perfect compromise, it encourages reasonableness. It encourages people around the table to come together and not be quite as divisive, which is better for a company. It's better to feel like you're pulling together than pulling separately. And a reasonable person at the top, wisdom of Solomon, person at the top is reasonable, it just filters on down throughout the company.
Absolutely. So true. Well, Vicky, we're coming to the end of the show, so I want everybody to know how to find you, where to get your book, if you want to offer something to them. So tell them a little bit about how to get in touch with you, your website, all of that.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Vicky Oliver. My website is Vicky with a Y, Oliver.com. My book that we talked about today is Bad Bosses, Crazy Coworkers, and Other Office Idiots. It's available on Amazon and places where books are sold. And if you go on my website, there's a lot of information, both for bosses and employees. There are articles. There are lots of things you can find out, and you can write to me there. And, we can have a conversation.
That sounds great. So remember, it's Vicky, Vicky, Oliver, Oliver.com. So you can find her there. You can find her information there. You can find her book there and on Amazon and all these other wonderful places. So if you were going to give a last piece of advice, we have about 2 minutes left. What piece of advice, Vicky, would you give our listeners?
I would say if you have people who work for you today, if you are a boss, you want to realize that leadership is a privilege and that you have to kind of work to get your workers to buy in to you And it's not a one-way street. It's a two-way street. There's a feedback loop. And you will know you're doing a great job as a boss when your employees are clamoring to work for you, clamoring to stay overtime, and people just want to come work at your company. That's how you know you're doing a fantastic job.
Sounds great. Well, you know where to get Vicky, VickyOliver.com. You can find all her information there. If you would like to have a conversation with me, go to spunkyoldbroad.com. Fill out the contact sheet. Tell me what you're interested in, who you might want as a guest, what topics you like to hear about, and we'll go from there, and I'll be in touch with you. This has really been fascinating, Vicky. I mean, nothing can beat the title of your book. I mean, I just think that is so groovy,
Thank you. Everyone comes up to me and says, "Oh, cannot you interview me for the book?" Well, no, because the book's already published. But yes, I'm happy to talk to you.
Bad bosses, we know them, crazy coworkers, lots of them, and other office idiots. Can't get any clearer than that. That sounds fabulous. Well, thanks so much for being with us, Vicky. We loved having you. Hopefully, it will be a great day for people who read your book and understand what you're trying to get across to people, because that's the key to everything. So thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Women in Business. I hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you have any suggestions as to who you'd like me to have as a guest, just email me at gaylecarson13@gmail.com. Be sure to check out www.sob6tips.com. And in the meantime, go to www.spunkyoldbroad.com to see the resources I have for you.